السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. قال الله في كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. One of the single most critical events that is narrated in the Quran is the story of the construction of the Kaaba, the house of God, by the hands of Ibrahim and his son Ismail. It is said in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ. That it was commissioned, it was tasked upon Ibrahim that he shall lift the foundations, build upon the foundations of the Kaaba. And some scholars suggest that the foundations already existed, al-qawa'id. That when the Prophet Adam first descended from the heavens to the earth, that he was commissioned with placing the foundation, qa'ida, of the house of God, of the Kaaba. And when Ibrahim came, he built upon the foundation that already existed there. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ. With him was his son Ismail, who of course was born to him after many, many years. When Ibrahim receives this child, Ismail, and then when he receives Ishaq as well, it's after many, many years. In fact, the Quran describes that Ibrahim and his wife Sarah had almost lost hope. They had almost lost hope. When they came to him, they said to him that we are here to deliver a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are here to give you bushra, glad tidings, glad news, good news. So he says to them, he says in Surah Al-Hijr, قَالَ أَبَشَّرْتُمُونِي عَلَىٰ أَن مَّسَّنِيَ الْكِبَرُ فَبِمَ تُبَشِّرُونَ. Are you here to give me good news that I'm an old man? Meaning that if you're here to tell me I'm an old man, I already know I'm an old man. فَبِمَ تُبَشِّرُونَ قَالُوا بَشَّرْنَاكَ بِالْحَقِّ فَلَا تَكُن مِّنَ الْقَانِطِينَ. We are here to deliver to you the truth. فَلَا تَكُن مِّنَ الْقَانِطِينَ. Do not be among those who have qunut. Qunut means yes. Yes means hopelessness. When you lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ibrahim had gotten to an age where he assumed that it was biologically impossible for him and his wife to conceive and to have children. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surprises him. He gives him first Ismail through Hajar, and then Ishaq through his wife Sarah. And that's why part of his dua, part of his supplication, he says, Alhamdulillah alladhi wahaba li ala al-kibari Ismail wa Ishaq. Inna Rabbi sami'u dua. That, oh Allah, thank you that at an old age that you have blessed me with Ismail and with Ishaq. So part of that story is that Ibrahim and Ismail, they built the Kaaba together. And after they built the Kaaba together, and after they called upon people to come and worship, the dua of Ibrahim is the following: رَبَّنَا وَاجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ. Oh Allah, keep us on our Islam. Keep us on our path of submission. And not just us on our path of submission, but also our children, also our progeny. وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ. So the dua of Ibrahim, it encompassed not only himself. Generally when we do dua, it's for ourselves. But his dua was for his children, for his grandchildren, and from every generation which would come after that. And so you find that the generations of prophets, they are descendants of the Prophet Ibrahim. So our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a direct descendant of the Prophet Ibrahim through his son Ismail. And so tonight I want to take a little bit of time and focus on the subject of our youth and what our youth need from us, what our progeny needs from us, and how do we make sure that we put them in the best position. Is it just through dua? Now Ibrahim teaches us the dua, but is it only through dua, or is there a certain behavior, type of behavior, or are there certain acts that we have to take upon ourselves in order to ensure that our progeny, they're in the right path? So I want to, before moving on, I want to share with you something that I read. And this is written by a psychologist, a youth psychologist, who describes the Gen Y, the infamous Gen Y. And the Gen Y are people that are born in the year 1985 and after. You know, the generation that everything that's going wrong in the world is their fault. The infamous Gen Y. And so he talks about, if you want to prepare, so there's a certain, with every generation comes a certain psychology. So in the preface of the book, he describes that every generation, you know, you have the Gen X and you have the baby boomers, and each one of those generations here in the United States is based on the year that they were born in. So 1945 and after, or 1965 and after. You have the greatest generation, what they call the greatest generation, the ones that fought in World War I. You have the generation that survived the Great Depression. Each one of them comes with a certain psychology. They were raised in a certain way. They were raised with a certain mentality, with a certain mindset. So the book that he wrote was specifically about Gen Y. And these are the people that are born in 1985 and after. Now, when you look at the Islamic tradition, what's interesting, there's a narration which is attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And it's not known whether this tradition is 100% authentic or not. Regardless whether it is or whether it is not, it's a beneficial saying. And that saying says the following. It says that do not raise your children, your progeny, your offspring, with the same standards that you were raised with. Because they were raised in a different generation that you were raised in. Meaning every generation presents different opportunities. It also presents different challenges. And so because there are different opportunities and different challenges, we need to begin to think in a different way, in a different mindset. So he begins the story, he says the following. He says, he talks about one of his personal experiences. He says, when I was young and I was learning about biology and I was learning about the animal world and the insect world and how things worked, you know, one of the first lessons that you're taught as a child in school, in science class, is the development of caterpillars to butterflies. So a caterpillar, part of its natural life cycle is that it develops into a butterfly. So what happens, what needs to happen in order for a caterpillar to develop into a butterfly? It creates for itself what? A cocoon, a little house. Kind of like a little, it's like a placenta kind of, a place where it can protect itself and it can grow itself And all of a sudden, when it's prepared to emerge as a butterfly, what happens? It naturally, by itself, part of the life cycle is that it breaks out, the wings come out, and if it's developed in a healthy form, it can fly. And it emerges differently than the way it was brought into the cocoon, from the way it created that cocoon around itself. So he says one of the first lessons that I received, this youth psychologist, was observing this in real life, watching this happen. If you've ever seen a cocoon on, dangling off of a tree or a branch, it's very exciting because you know that it's about to develop into a beautiful butterfly. So as children, as a child, he says that, well, I began to observe, and I was very, very anxious because I knew what was going to happen, but I wanted to see it. So he says, I began to observe, and I was patiently waiting. And now all of a sudden, like most children, when you tell them to wait, the patience meter begins to dilute, it begins to run down, minute after minute, hour after hour. And so he says, I thought to myself, well, maybe I should assist the little guy. Maybe I should help him. So he says, because I was so anxious, because I wanted to see what this butterfly would actually look like, he says, I took a little knife and I made a little tear. I made a little slit, a little incision, so that I can help it emerge, thinking that I would help it emerge. He says, well, nothing happened, so I made the incision a little bit bigger. So you know where this story is going. He made the incision just a little bit bigger, and then he made it a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and all of a sudden, the little caterpillar that was inside it, it plopped out. And he looked at it, and he thought it was going to be a beautiful butterfly. He said instead it was this just deformed, ugly little insect. And he says, I was bummed out. I couldn't understand that as a kid. I couldn't understand that as a child. Why was that happening? He says, then I learned my lesson. And the lesson was that I needed to allow this caterpillar to develop at its own pace. I needed to allow nature to run its course. And so he compares that with child psychology. He says, sometimes as parents, he says sometimes we rush into things. And because of not our evil intentions, but because of our good intentions, our overly good intentions, we try to prepare our children in a certain way, we try to prepare our youth in a certain way, and it doesn't end up happening in the way that we want, because there's something that's missing. He says what's missing usually is not the resources, but rather the understanding, the proper understanding. He said, now if I, as a child, if I had the patience, and if I would just allow nature to run its course, then that caterpillar would emerge into a butterfly on its own. A beautiful butterfly with wings, and it can fly on its own. But because I didn't have the patience, and that patience wasn't because I had a bad intention, it's quite the contrary, it's because I actually had a good intention. But he says sometimes good intentions are not enough. So throughout the book he talks about youth psychology, and I don't want to take up too much of the time, I just wanted to share something with you. He talks about different parenting styles. Now, as a disclaimer to the young people in this room, as I talk about these parenting styles, this is not an excuse for you to criticize your parents. Okay, let's get this straight. This is not a right or wrong thing, or bad or good thing. This is just so that we can inform ourselves and understand what kind of parenting styles exist out there. Because you might not be parents now, but you will be parents in the future. And the better that you prepare yourself, the better that you will perform in the future. And one of the ways that you can actually honor your parents, because we're seeking to honor our parents, and this is a night, a very, very sacred and blessed night. And that you have the chance to make that dua and that commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that, oh Allah, I want to honor my parents. Whether our parents are with us or whether they are not with us. And the way that you honor your parents is what? How do you honor your parents? One way by doing that, a prime example, is by preparing yourself for parenthood. Giving your children a very great life. Sometimes we look at our parents And sometimes we become very critical. We say, oh, well, my parents didn't do this for me, or they didn't do that. Well, instead of being critical, how about you make a commitment? And this is the perfect time, the month of Ramadan, that you make a commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever my parents were missing, I'm going to provide for my own children. That's the best way that you could honor your own parents. So, you know, some of this is pretty amusing, but for each parenting style, and he talks about the parenting styles that he has observed as a psychologist and as a mentor and as a person who has had the chance to counsel parents and children. So here's a number of different parenting styles, and he talks about what a possible solution could be. Okay, so he says because there's a new generation of children, there needs to be a new generation of parents. So he says one type of parents are called helicopter parents. What are helicopter parents? What does a helicopter do? A helicopter, it hovers overhead. You can hear when a helicopter is hovering overhead. It makes a loud buzzing noise. And you know, just last night actually, in the middle of the night around 2 or 3 a.m., as I was in the room, I heard a very, very loud hovering noise above. And you know, I was thinking maybe there's a criminal nearby, or I think the helicopter was hovering way too low, but the whole building began to shake. So sometimes helicopter parents, they hover very, very close. They have their eye on their children 24/7. And again, this isn't a bad concern. This comes out of well-intentioned. This comes out of good concern. And as they do, they hover too close, they make that buzzing noise. And it's almost a relief when they go away, right? So he calls these helicopter parents. He says in this case, helicopter parents, usually the reason they are helicopter parents is because they want to protect their children from everything. They want to protect their children from the outside world. Instead of, he says, here's the solution, here's what you can consider. He says, instead of instilling in your children the right behaviors and the right principles, so that you know and you're assured that when they go out there in the world, they're going to make the right choices. He says that's a better solution. So this is one type. He says helicopter parents. Another type are karaoke parents. If you've ever seen a karaoke, where a person stands up in front of the microphone and they try to imitate the singer, right? And you know, even in our mu'min culture, we have the karaoke culture, where you have the raduds, the person the people that recite the certain anashid, and then you have somebody that tries to imitate them with the voice, and they try to recite the same noha or the same nasheed. Karaoke parents. He says, what are karaoke parents? Are parents who try too hard. In the same way that a person is reciting karaoke, they try way too hard. He says these people, they try too hard. Meaning that they try to make sure that they're on their kid's side every single time. That they're their children's best buddy. They dress like their children. They behave like their children. They speak in the same language as their children. They watch the same movies as their children. They listen to the same music as their children. So he says, instead of doing that, your children don't need another friend. They have enough friends as it is out there. What your children need are leaders. So a leader is different than a buddy. You know, there's a narration. It says, and it talks about where true friendship comes from. It says, صَدِيقُكَ مَنْ صَدَّقَكَ لَا مَنْ صَدَقَكَ. It's very, very powerful. It says your sadiq, your friend. You want to know who your true friend is? Your true friend is the one that tells you the truth. صَدَّقَكَ. صَدَقَكَ, meaning tell you the truth. لَا مَنْ صَدَّقَكَ. Not the one that just believes everything that you say. What do we call that person that believes everything that you say? A yes man. A yes man. Everything that you say, yeah, I agree. They never ever disagree. Your friend, your true friend, is the one that sometimes will disagree with you. Sometimes they will tell you the truth. Not because of ego, but because they see the truth and maybe you don't see the truth. Maybe you don't recognize the truth. So if we truly want to befriend our children, we don't say yes to them at every turn, everything that they want. Again, and some of this comes from good intentions. So you have helicopter parents. You have karaoke parents. Then you have dry cleaner parents. What's a dry cleaner parent? You know, you go to the dry cleaner, you give them the suit, you give them the shirt, You show back, you come back a day later, you show up, and it's in pristine condition. It's in perfect condition. Some parents, unfortunately, they're dry cleaner parents, meaning that they expect somebody else to do the tarbiyah on their behalf. They expect somebody else to raise their children on their behalf. And growing up in the field, in the world of Islamic education, serving the Muslim community, growing up in a Muslim school myself, I can tell you that one of the biggest issues and challenges are dry cleaner parents. And that they will drop their kids off at the masjid or the Husayniyah or the Islamic school, and they expect that organization, that institution, to do all of the work. That their children are going to come back as Jibreel or Mikael. Completely free, completely obedient, completely virtuous. Well, a reality check, that doesn't happen. I can share with you my own experiences. Actually, quite the contrary happens. We would experience in the Islamic school where the Islamic values were taught and Islamic principles were taught. And some parents, of course, again, not bad intention. These are well-intentioned parents. But they would come and they would take their children from the public school system and they would dump them at the Islamic school, thinking that the Islamic school is going to be the solution. Not only would it not help, but it would also rub off on the kids that were good. And it would change their behavior and it would negatively influence them. When you bring your children, your youth, to the masjid, understand that at best the masjid only does 10 or 15 or 20% at best. Meaning that what is not, the behavior that is not taught in the home cannot be taught at the masjid. So number one, it has to start at the home. So he says the solution, if you find yourself in that situation as a dry cleaner person or a dry cleaner parent, is to focus on your priorities. Sometimes that usually means that you're spending too much time outside. Maybe you're a workaholic. Maybe you're giving all of your energy to the outside world and you're not giving enough energy to the inside world, which is your family. Okay, you're gonna like this one, youth. The next type of parent are volcano parents. What's a volcano? What happens with a volcano? It simmers, sometimes for years, decades, sometimes for centuries, sometimes for thousands of years, sometimes for millions of years. It sits there and it simmers and simmers and simmers. And all of a sudden, when it's had enough, when enough pressure has built up, it explodes. And all of the villagers have to flee for their lives. Everyone in a 100-mile vicinity, everybody has to flee for their lives. They hold it in. They hold in the frustration. They erupt over sometimes the smallest issues. And sometimes that has to do with internal issues. Sometimes that has to do with internal anger issues. See, anger is one of the things that the shaitan tests us with. The hadith says, al-ghadab. Ghadab is anger. Ghadab and ghayv. So, ghadab and ghayv are internal anger and external anger. Al-ghadab jamratu shaitan tuqadu fi qalb ibn Adam. Ghadab, anger, it's a burning piece of charcoal that is cast in the heart of man by the shaitan. So whenever you find yourself overly angry about something, what that means is that the shaitan has taken a piece of his coal, hot coal, and he's cast it into your heart. Al-ghadab jamratu shaitan tuqadu fi qalb ibn Adam. So beware of anger, beware of eruption. He says then there are dropout parents. In the same way that you have people who drop out from high school and college. This is the person that has let their children down. You know, one of the rampant issues here in the United States, and also in other countries, but if you study the prison system, the incarceration system, many of the people today that are incarcerated in the prison system come from a dropout family. Either the father was not there physically, or if the father was there physically, they were not there mentally. They did not have enough energy to pour into their children. You know, I was reading something very, very particular. It caught my eye. It says that you're born as a male. Genetically, you're born as a male. XY, right? But it's your choice to become a man. There's a difference between being a male and being a man. So if you want to be considered a man, most people today, they want to be considered men, or they want to be considered a woman, but they're not willing to accept that responsibility. See, becoming a man is different than just being a male. You're born as a male. You don't get to choose. But it's your choice whether you become a man or you don't become a man. In fact, the Quran tells us, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَبَلَغَ أَرْبَعِينَ سَنَةً, that the climax, when man becomes a man, at the age of 40. Now it's said at the age of 40 because most prophets were ordained as prophets at the age of 40, such as our own Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran describes that age, the age of 40, as the height of spiritual maturity. What do we call 40 here in the United States? What happens at the age of 40? Midlife crisis. And these days we also have a quarter life crisis. By the age of 25, you have the quarter life crisis. We'll talk about that on another night. But midlife crisis, what does that mean? A person looks back on their life and they know they've reached the halfway point, and they ponder and they wonder, have I actually achieved anything in my life? Have I actually given anything back? Or has my life been all about accumulating for myself? And if a person has not reached maturity by the age of 40, there's a dua, there's a hadith. It says that the shaitan comes to that person and he wipes his hand on his head and he says to him, أهلا بوجه لا يفلح أبدا. He says, welcome, my buddy, my friend. He says, I welcome a face that will never see success. You haven't done it for 40 years, don't look at the next 40 years. أهلا بوجه لا يفلح أبدا. So, a rampant problem, a challenge in our societies is fatherlessness. Meaning that sometimes the father is there in the home. Physically he's there in the home, but mentally he's not there. Mentally he's not available. Dropout parents, the ones that let go of their parents. Then of course you have the bullied parents. These are the ones that are doormats. Our hearts go out to you. Then you have the commando parents. And the commando parents are the ones that want perfection. In everything that happens, they want perfection. It has to be perfect. And these are people that are oriented on perfection rather than oriented on growth. And where we should really be focused is not on perfection, but rather on growth. So that if our youth fail, if our children fail, we need to ask ourselves the question, are they learning from their failures? Are they learning from their mistakes? Are we allowing our children to grow? If you allow your children to grow, then you have nothing to worry about. But if we're always criticizing them for their failures, if we're always criticizing them for their mistakes. You know, I knew a father who, when his children would get bad grades, and here the modern schooling system, it's taught us to become very, very lazy. It's taught our children to also become very lazy because it's all about grades. It's all about memorizing information so that you can pass a test. I'm not saying don't go to school, please, don't get me wrong. Go to school, pursue your education, pursue your higher education, but understand that your education does not only come from school. You need to also seek outside sources of education. So, I know a father who, when his children were struggling academically, if they brought home a test and it was a D or an F, he would pin it on the door of the house for everybody to see when they walked in and out. And unfortunately, those children, they grew up, eventually they grew up into adults. And they didn't know how to handle situations in their life. Because it was either pass or fail. And they were not in some areas, they were simply not, they were not talented. But the father held it against his children. Instead of focusing on growth, instead of focusing on how can I help you grow? How can I help you overcome? How can I help you improve? The father was focused on criticism, on pointing the finger, on expecting the children to do something that they were not naturally talented to do. So these are commando parents. Now again, I say this. These are different parenting styles. This does not give us an excuse to judge or criticize our parents. If anything, as youth, we should prepare ourselves and think, well, where should I line up my priorities from today, so that when I have the chance to have children in the future, that I could raise them in the proper manner. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So what is the glue that holds our relationships together? If we want to make amends, and this is the night, brothers and sisters, Laylatul Qadr, where we make amends with our family members, where we make amends with our children, where we make amends with our youth, and where we begin to prepare them for the future, where we make amends and we fix relationship with our parents, even if our parents are not with us, even if our parents have passed away. We fix relationship with our grandparents, even if they have passed away. You know that as a mu'min, as a believer, you can still do dua for your parents that have passed. One dua that we read sometimes in the salah, Rabbi ighfirli, oh Allah, forgive me, wali waliday, my parents, my mother, my father, warhamhuma, have mercy on them, kama rabbayani saghira. What a powerful dua. In the same way that my parents had mercy, in the same way that my father and my mother had sleepless nights taking care of me, out of their compassion and their mercy, oh Allah, have mercy upon my parents. Send your love to them. Send your forgiveness. I acknowledge that my parents are not perfect, but because they had compassion, because they had love, because they had mercy for me, oh Allah, I want you to have the same mercy. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا واجزهما بالإحسان إحسانا. If they have done good, then oh Allah, reciprocate that good. You do good to them. وبالسيئات غفرانا. And if they have done evil, then give them your blessings. Give them your mercy. So what's the glue that holds our relationships together? If we make the commitment in this night or before the day of Eid, because we also have until the days of Eid to make those amends. Some narrations tell us that Laylatul Qadr is such a powerful night in terms of the magnitude, the forgiveness that is available, that the same opportunity is not given until the day of Arafat, in the month of Dhul Hijjah. So as we exit the month of Ramadan, we enter into the month of Shawwal. After Shawwal is Dhul Qa'dah, after the month of Dhul Qa'dah is Dhul Hijjah. The day of Arafat is in the month of Dhul Hijjah. The same opportunity to receive forgiveness. Not that forgiveness is unavailable, but the same opportunity of the same magnitude to receive forgiveness is unavailable until the day of Arafat. So take advantage. So if we decide to make that commitment and make amends, what is the glue that holds our relationships together? The number one ingredient, the glue that holds our relationships together, is trust, the T word. So how do we foster trust? You know, I was reading in a book the other day, it was saying that when it comes to relationships, why is it important for there to be trust? Well, one of the functions that trust plays in our relationships is that it allows us to bypass most of the formalities. Have you ever noticed sometimes when you're talking to someone that you really trust, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's, well, maybe not a coworker, but someone that you work with in some sort of capacity. What allows you to bypass the formalities and go straight to the heart of the matter whenever you have a conversation is trust. But when you don't really trust someone, you hold back. You have formalities. How's the weather? Did you see that sports game? You know, you try to talk about everything else except for the heart of the matter. But when you have trust, you go straight to the heart of the matter. So how do we build trust? There's a number of ways. Number one, and I say this to the youth and the parents of the youth. Number one is you have to really understand the individual. If you want to be invested in your youth, you truly have to understand your youth. And the way that you understand your youth is by listening to them. You know, they say that God created us with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That we should listen twice the amount that we should talk. But most of us, we talk not twice, not 3 times, but 5 and 10 times more than we actually listen. And then we wonder why people don't trust us. We wonder why people don't take advice from us. Now I'm in a very bad situation because every night I lecture to you for about an hour and I only listen to you for about 2 minutes. So this is, I ask for forgiveness. This is hypocrisy coming from me. But in our personal relationships, when you wonder, why isn't this person listening to me? Why isn't this person taking my advice? Well, have you ever thought, maybe, why am I not listening to this person instead of why are they not listening to me? So try to listen, truly listen. Develop empathy. Develop those interpersonal skills. Then you will develop trust. Another part of that is keeping commitments. When you say you're going to do something, make sure that you do it. Don't break your promises. See, every one of us, there's an author, he puts it in such a beautiful way. He says that with our relationships, with the success of our relationships, he says each and every one of us, we have an account, not a bank account, but a trust account. And not a trust, I don't mean a trust fund, an emotional trust account. And what happens with that trust account is that you can either make deposits or you can make withdrawals. And anytime you're around someone, anytime you say something, anytime you behave in a particular way, you are either making a withdrawal or you are making a deposit. So if you want trust to increase, what do? You have to constantly make deposits. Some people, if you've noticed, they only make withdrawals. So the person that tells you what to do and doesn't listen to you, they are making withdrawals. And some people, they make a lot of withdrawals and they never ever make deposits. And what happens when you make too many withdrawals without making deposits? With your bank account, what happens? So many people have overdraft and insufficient funds. They're running on credit that doesn't belong to them. Youth with parents and parents with youth. It goes both ways. Sometimes you're thinking, well, why don't my parents listen to me? Well, have you also listened to your parents? Have you also tried to understand what is important and what is significant to your parents? What your parents want from you? You know, there's a dua in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He describes the parents and what they say to their children. وَهُمَا يَسْتَغِيثَانِ اللَّهِ. Not وَهُمَا يَسْأَلَانِ اللَّهِ. Not they ask Allah. يَسْتَغِيثَانِ. Ighatha. Do you know what that means? Ighatha is to plead. When you plead with someone, وَهُمَا يَسْتَغِيثَانِ اللَّهِ. They beg to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to their children. وَيْلَكَ آمِنْ. Woe to you. Have iman. Have faith. إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ. That tells us that the concern of our parents, they want our success. They want us to prosper. And they plead to Allah. You don't know. Sometimes as youth, we don't understand how much our parents plead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we believe and that we are prosperous and that we are on the straight path. So sometimes, this concept goes both ways. That when you make deposits, when you expect deposits from your parents, are you also making deposits into their account as well? وَهُمَا يَسْتَغِيثَانِ اللَّهِ وَيْلَكَ آمِنْ إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ. So listening, keeping commitments, attending to the little things, showing personal integrity. Whenever you make a withdrawal, you also apologize. Imagine if you had to apologize to your bank every time you made a withdrawal. All of us would be wealthy. We wouldn't have any financial problems. Imagine there's a system where you have to actually write a letter to your bank every time you make a withdrawal. All of you would tear up your ATM cards. Nobody would use them anymore. But imagine now you have that account with a person that every time you make an emotional withdrawal, meaning every time you break a promise, every time you don't hold your commitments, every time you preach without listening, you have to apologize. Imagine, all of us, our bank accounts would flourish. Our emotional accounts would flourish. So because we're in the night of Qadr, let's wrap up. What is it that we can do for our youth? See, when we go back to the story of Ibrahim, his dua was generational. Meaning, he said, رَبَّنَا وَاجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ. So, oh Allah, keep myself and Ismail on our Islam. Don't allow us to stray away from our Islam. وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِنَا, meaning that it was generational. He was looking to the generations that come after. You know, there's a proverb. It says that if you want prosperity for 1 year, grow grains. And if you want prosperity for 10 years, grow trees. And if you want prosperity for 100 years, grow people. So his dua was generational. Number one, we need to understand the power of dua. How powerful dua is. And we are in a night of dua. We are in a night of supplication. We are in a night of ighatha. You know, it's said that Musa alayhi salam, the Prophet Musa, one day he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, "Oh Allah," he says, "I want you to show me my partner in heaven. Who is going to be my partner in heaven?" So God tells him, he says, "You really want to know?" He says, "Yes, I'm anxious to know. Who's going to be my partner in heaven?" You know, when you're young, one of your overwhelming thoughts is, who's the person I'm going to marry? Admit it, you think about it on a regular basis. Who's that person that one day I'm going to marry and spend the rest of my life with? They're out there in the world today. They're roaming around. Some of you, you already have plans. You know exactly who it is. Bravo, that's very, very good. But Musa was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's anxious, he's curious, he wants to know who is his partner in heaven. So he says, "You want to know? Let me show you who your partner is in heaven." So he points him. He says, "I want you to go to this place at this time and I want you to observe. You'll meet your partner in heaven." So he follows God's commands, he follows God's orders. He goes to the marketplace. He sees a young man. God tells him, "This is your partner in heaven." So Musa begins to observe. And he tries to find something that's outstanding about this young man. He tries to think, God is telling me that this is my partner in heaven. Let me observe. What's so special about him? So he sees the young man, his occupation is a butcher. He's a butcher. Slaughters the animal, cuts up the meat, sells it to people. So he observes him. He sees that there's nothing spectacular. I mean, he's not selling a special type of beef or anything like that has more thawab. I don't know. There's nothing special, nothing significant about him. So he observes him the entire day, and then finally he decides to go up to him. He introduces himself. He doesn't introduce himself as Musa, of course, but he says, "Can I be your guest tonight?" He says, the young man says, "Of course." He's a good man. You know, why not? So he brings him into the home. And he notices, inside his home, he doesn't have like a special ayah hung up or hirz or something like that. There's nothing particular. He notices that this young man has a mother that's living with him. And his mother can't do anything for herself. Meaning that she can't bathe herself, she cannot feed herself. She's disabled. So the young man excuses himself. He says, "I have to go take care of my mother." So he takes care of her mother. He feeds her. He clothes her. He shelters her. He reads to her. He tends to her wounds. He speaks to her. He's there for her. He listens to her. And then finally, the last thing, he notices that he comes in closer and his mother whispers something in his ear. So when he comes and sits with Musa, Musa tells him, he says, "Look, I've observed you for the whole day. There's really nothing special about you, except that the fact that you're taking care of your mother." He says, "I noticed that you take care of your mother and that she whispered something in your ear. I didn't hear what she said. What is it that she said to you?" He says, "This is my daily routine. What you saw was my daily routine. I handle my business. I take care of people. I provide for them a service, and then I come home and I take care of my mother. And every night after I'm done taking care of her, she whispers into my ear, 'May Allah make you the partner of Musa in heaven.'" That's it. Musa sees. He says, "Is that it?" He understands the power of the dua of the mother. How powerful that dua is. So number one, we begin with a dua for our parents, but a dua for our children. Because when we do that dua for our children, that supplication for our youth, it is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do we ask for? Number one, and this is something which is brought up in Laylatul Qadr, because a number of narrations, one narration in particular tells us, that those who do not benefit from Laylatul Qadr are the ones that have hubb ad-dunya. They have love of this world in their hearts. So number one is to do a dua, a supplication for our youth, that the love of this world, this dunya, is taken from their hearts. One of the supplications that we read in the month of Ramadan is dua Abu Hamza Thumali. In that we read, Ilahi akhrij hubb ad-dunya min qalbi. Oh Allah, remove the love of this dunya from my heart. Remove it from my heart, so that I could worship you wholeheartedly. You know, there's a narration. It says that one day, the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, he was approached by a young man who wanted to become his disciple. He said, I want to become your disciple. I want to learn from you. I want you to become my master, and I want to become your student. So he turns to him, and he says to him, he says, fine. He says, that's fine. But the people that love this world, that have a love of this world, they cannot be my disciples. They cannot be my students. So he begins to follow him around. Isa alayhi salam begins to perform miracles in front of him. So he begins to see the different miracles. And then they decide they're going to sit down and they're going to break bread together. So Isa brings out 3 loaves of bread. So he consumes 1 loaf. His student, disciple, consumes another loaf. And he leaves the 3rd loaf. He goes to the river, to the body of water. He gets some water. He drinks it. He comes back and the 3rd loaf is not there. So he asks the student. He says, where's the 3rd loaf? He says, I don't know. I have no idea. Don't ask me. I don't know where it is. He says, okay. Are you sure you don't know? He says, yeah, I don't know where the 3rd loaf is. He says, okay. So he begins to follow him. Again, he begins to observe the miracles of Isa alayhi salam. He walks on water, he cures leprosy, he talks to the dead, brings them back to life. All of the miracles that are mentioned in the Quran, we believe that the Prophet Isa had those miracles. And every time he asks him, he says, where's that 3rd loaf of bread? Now this man, he's seeing the miracles. He knows that Isa is an extraordinary man. He's able to do things that normal people are not able to do. But yet he insists that he doesn't know where that 3rd loaf of bread is. So one of the miracles that Isa performs in front of him is that he picks up a pile of dirt in his hand. And he waves his hand over it. And that pile of dirt turns into 3 pieces of pure gold. So he tells him, he says, look. He says, let's make a deal. I want to get to the truth of this matter. There are 3 pieces of gold. Let's split the gold amongst ourselves. Whoever consumed, whatever number of loaves of bread that you consume, you'll receive 1 piece of bread. You'll receive 1 piece of gold. So now, the man saw that it was his favorite to tell the truth. So he told the truth. He said, you know what? I had that 2nd piece of bread, that 2nd loaf. Because now he wants a 2nd piece of gold. So Isa alayhi salam, he says, you know what? Here, take all of the gold. هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. You have too much love of this dunya in your heart. He says, you can't be my student. You can't be my disciple. There's no use in me teaching you. So the man, he's happy. You know, he gets his gold. He moves on. And then he's approached by a couple of thieves. So what do those thieves say? They said, okay, we'll pay up. Give us the gold or we'll kill you. He says, gentlemen, come on. We can be civil about this. Okay, let's sit down. Let's have a conversation about this. We'll get to the heart of the matter. I'm willing to give you. They say, okay. So he says, okay, well let me give you some of the gold. Let's split it between us. I want to keep my life and I want to keep some of the gold. So they decide, okay, well, that's fine. We'll take half of the gold. It's better than nothing. It's better than him getting away. So they split the gold. But they decide, okay, you know what? Now that we've conducted business in a friendly manner and now we've talked it out, so let's enjoy a meal together. So what does he do? He goes and he fetches some food for them to enjoy with one another. Now, as he's fetching the food, he thinks, you know what? Forget about these guys. Let me put poison in this food. I'll have them eat it. I'll get rid of them. I'll take my gold back and I'll get out of here. On the other hand, they're thinking, you know what? Why are we settling for half? This was way too easy. When he comes back, kill him, take the gold. So he comes back. They kill him. They take the gold. But you know, all this work and all this deliberation, it gets you very, very hungry. So what did they do? They ate the food. They poisoned. They die. Isa alayhi salam walks by. He sees all of them dead with the gold sitting there. And he says to his disciples, he says, this is what the dunya does when you chase it. In the end, it strips you of everything. Stop chasing the dunya. That doesn't mean that you cannot enjoy the luxuries of life, but don't make dunya your priority. I say this because today we live in a very, very particular world where you're taught that the glory, and you see this on social media, you see this on Instagram and on Snapchat, that people flashing all the stuff that they can't even afford. Most of the stuff that they're flashing on social media is stuff that they really can't afford. The people who can truly afford it, they're not flashing that stuff. They don't need to flash that stuff. So understand that you are allowed to enjoy the bounties and the luxuries of this world, but do it in a proper manner. Don't let that be your ham and your gham. Meaning that don't let that be the thing that stresses you out and keeps you up every single night. How to make that next dollar so that you can be flashy and show it off in people's faces. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Part of the night of Qadr also is to perfect our a'mal. And one of the basic a'mal that we can perfect is our salah. There's a narration. It says that one day a man comes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and the Imam tells him, he says, "Atuhsinu salatak?" He says, "Do you know how to pray in the proper fashion?" The companion, he looks to him, he says, "Yes, Yabna Rasulullah, I have memorized the book of Hariz." Hariz was one of the companions of the Imam who had compiled a book of hadith on how to pray, on the rites of prayer. He says, "I've memorized the book of hadith, meaning that I'm an expert." He says, "Okay, then pray in front of me. Let me see." So after the man is done praying the 2 units of prayer, the Imam turns to him. He says the following. He says, "How embarrassing is it that one of our followers, one of our Shia, spends 60 or 70 years of his life and he does not offer one proper prayer." And then the Imam stands in front of him and he offers a proper prayer. The hadith describes the Imam that everything in his body was towards the Qibla. Even his feet, you know, sometimes when we stand, we have a natural tendency to have our feet point outwards. His feet, both of them were pointing towards the Qibla. Meaning that everything of his was pointed towards the Qibla. And he prayed in front of him. He demonstrated in front of him. You know, if you're sitting here and you have some shak of your prayer, you have scholars that you can refer to. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be embarrassed to ask. You know, what is more embarrassing is that we assume that we're doing something the proper way when in reality we're not doing it. And on the Day of Judgment it shows that we haven't offered a single fast properly or a single prayer properly. So let us learn to make those amends in ourselves. Let us learn to make that dua for our parents, for our youth, for one another. If we have to forgive someone, brothers and sisters, this is the night to forgive that person. If you want the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, brothers and sisters, this is the night to ask for it. Ask from the bottom of your hearts. God is saying, ask me, I will give you anything that you want. You want a good career, you want good grades, you want a spouse to come into your life, you want children, you want good children, you want good relationships with people, you want success, you want to hold your head high, you want to be able to propagate the message of Islam, you want to give love and compassion. All of that tonight is the night to ask for that. Do not forget the people in this community, those who have passed and those who are with us, and those who are yet to join us in your dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to reach out to Him in this holy night, to spend it in supplication, in dedication, in obedience. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rectify our affairs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us success, to put our youth on the right path, on the right direction, to allow us to be servants of our 12th Imam, Al-Imam Al-Hujjah, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif, to allow us the intercession of our Imams, to not forbid us from the intercession of our Prophet. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات، إنك على كل شيء قدير، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.